Hare Krishna, everybody.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hope you can.
Hare Krishna. Hare
Hare Krishna. Hope you can see my screen and you can hear me properly. So, just a quick update on the chat feature. There were updates to the system, and we worked last week with the admin to resolve the issue, but looks like it's still not visible for some of you, or maybe all of you. We'll just continue to work, hoping to get it resolved soon. But meanwhile, if you have any questions or need to interrupt me, please feel free to do that at any point in time. So having said that, I do want to take a moment to go over the translation of this bhajan that we sing every time. It's only 2 verses. Srila Prabhupada used to always sing this particular bhajan before every class that he would conduct. And Srila Prabhupada also said that this is a perfect description of Vrindavan. So everything is there in this song. So we see that it begins with glorification of Radha Madhav. So Krishna is the lover of Radharani, and he displays many amorous pastimes in the grooves of Vrindavan. So Kunja refers to different grooves. So in the forests, there are different trees, and sometimes the bushes are thick, and there are creepers which grow all over the place, and it sometimes creates a nice groove. It's almost like a small cove, and it provides shade, and the creepers might have flowers. So it creates this nice environment in which Krishna associates with Radharani, and over there he displays so many amorous pastimes. And he is Gopi Jana Vallabha. So he is the husband of all the gopis. So in this world, we see there are men, there are women, there are husbands and wives, and each of us, those who are all married, we have our own spouses. So the duality of male and female is there in this world. But in spiritual world, there is only one male, which is Krishna. He is the original enjoyer, and everyone else are to be enjoyed by him. And so everyone else is feminine. So there's only one Purusha. So Krishna is actually, the original husband of everyone, right? So Gopi Jana Vallabha. So the gopis, they are not married to Krishna from a mundane perspective that we see, but for Krishna there is nothing wrong, and there is no material lust that we find in this world. Krishna is Atmaram, he is self-satisfied. He does not need any external source or any external agent to experience happiness. So one of the names of Krishna is Atmaram. But for the sake of pleasure of his devotees, he does engage and he does get enjoyment. It's not that but that enjoyment is not on a material platform. He is attracted not by any external features, but he is attracted by the genuine pure love of his devotees, which could be in any of the 5 moods that we had discussed, right? So you have neutral relationship, servitorship, friendship, parental affection, and conjugal love. And he is Girivaradhari. So there is this famous pastime of Krishna where he lifts Giriraj Govardhan for 7 days and night. When Indra is doubting who is this small child who is lifting, who seems to be very powerful, but Indra had its doubts. And when Krishna stopped the worship of Indra, Indra actually had to thought that I'm going to teach him a lesson. But then finally realized that it was his mistake. This Krishna is none other than the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Krishna, so here Krishna we see is referred by so many different names, right? So the thing about Krishna is more than a god, right? So he's not interested in being worshipped as a god. Rather, he gets more enjoyment when he's not referred as God, but he is referred in connection to all his devotees, in connection to all the pastimes that he performs. When you refer him as Radha Madhav, the husband of Radha, or Gopi Jana Vallabha, right, the well-wisher of the gopis, or the one who lifted the Govardhan hill, or the one who enjoys in the pleasure groves of Vrindavan. So when this Krishna is referred in association with his devotee, he is very pleased. So another name of Krishna is Yashodanandana. So in Vrindavan, we see the pastime of Krishna in parental affection also, in the sense that some of his devotees become his parents. So Yashoda is the foster mother of Krishna, who is a pure devotee, expresses her devotion to Krishna in maternal affection. Braja Jana Ranjana. So he displays Braja Jana Ranjana is referring to the delighter of the inhabitants of Braja. So Braja Jana are residents of Braja, Braja Jana, and Ranjana means one who gives pleasure. Yamuna Tira Vanachari, and one who played on the banks of river Yamuna, and he performed so many different pastimes. So everything is covered just in these 2 verses. So Srila Prabhupada says this is a perfect description of Vrindavan. And reason I wanted to talk a little bit about that is I know we have been reciting these prayers in the beginning of every class, but I don't think I ever covered the explanation. The other reason I wanted to cover this was Radha Ashtami is coming up. This Tuesday is Radha Ashtami. That's the appearance day of Srimati Radharani. It is a very important festival for the Gaudiyas. In some ways, you can say it's even more important than Krishna Janmashtami. So Krishna appeared on the 8th day of waning moon. So when the moon is decreasing in size, it's called waning moon, Krishna Paks. So on the 8th day of that waning moon is when Krishna appeared. So you have 15 days of waning moon, and then we get Amas, or the new moon night. And after that, the moon starts increasing in size. So on the 8th day of the waxing moon is when Radha Rani appears. So there's a gap. It's not the same year actually. Radha Rani did not appear in the same year as Krishna. It's a different year. But if you just look at the dates according to the lunar calendar, it is apart by about 15 days, right? Yeah, 15 days, because you have 8th day of waning moon, and then you add another 7 days or 8 days, then you come to new moon night, and then another 8 days of waxing moon, and then that is Radharani's appearance day. So that is coming up this Tuesday. And Radharani is very special. So in Gaudiya Sampradaya, which we represent, the worship of Radharani is very important, even more than worship of Krishna. So the worship, those who are the devotees of Vishnu are known as Vaishnavas. Those who are devotees of Krishna, they are known as Krishas. And those who are worshippers of Radharani, those are called Gaudiyas. So Radharani is in golden complexion, or Gaura. Gaura is another name for gold. And the Ra becomes Da, so it sounds like Gauda, Gaudiya. So the Gaudiyas are worshippers of Radharani. Their primary devotion is towards Radharani. The only reason the Gaudiyas are connected to Krishna is because Radharani is a devotee of Krishna. Otherwise, the Gaudiyas do not have directly anything to do with Krishna. So this is the mood. And the mood of Radharani is that it is that of worship in Krishna in the mood of separation. So Krishna, he left Vrindavan around the age of 11, and he went to Mathura, and he killed Kamsa. He was there for some time, and then he performed his pastime of running away from Jarasandh. Then he established this magnificent city of Dwarka off the coast of Gujarat, and then he was there for 100 plus years. And then he meets Radharani and other gopis in Kurukshetra when a solar eclipse is going on. At the time, Radharani is, and gopis, they say that we are so happy to see you, but we don't have the same affection, because here you are like a king. The king of Dwarka has come with his entourage. We can only feel connection with the Vrindavan Krishna. So we are requesting Krishna to come back to Vrindavan. And that is the beginning of the Rath Yatra festival, where so there was Balram also was present, Subhadra was also present, and the residents of Vrindavan, they're inviting all three of them to come to Vrindavan. In that sense, they are pulling them to come to Vrindavan. So that is Rath Yatra. Eventually, Krishna does visit Vrindavan, and then he marries all the gopis, as he had promised earlier. But you see, there was 100 years of span where the gopis and Radharani, they are living in extreme mood of separation. They are completely devastated the day Krishna leaves Vrindavan, and then all their life they were, just, so much tormented. I mean, in a way, it is a spiritual ecstasy. It's a different kind of ecstasy when the beloved is away from the lover, right? And so that is the mood of Radharani. So a little bit about Radharani. Those who just joined, Radha Ashtami is coming up on Tuesday. Just wanted to talk a little bit about Radha, her glories. So Radharani, just like Mother Sita, Radharani was found on a lotus, 1,000-petal lotus. This is again in Brajamandal. I think the name of her village is Raval. And Vrishabhanu Maharaj, he finds her, and that's how she appears. So you can understand she's not did not take a mundane birth. Again, Lakshmi is none other than Radharani. She is an expansion. Rukmini is an expansion of Radharani, and Sita Devi is also an expansion of Radharani. So just like Krishna is the original fountainhead or Godhead of all incarnations, similarly, all the Shakti incarnations, even in spiritual world, Lakshmi incarnations, they are all expansions from Radharani. And who is Radharani herself? Radha is not different from Krishna. Originally, they were all one person. So Krishna has pleasure potencies within himself. He has desire to enjoy. So his internal desire to enjoy, that potency, that energy, he gives that energy a form. And that energy expands and assumes a form, and that form is Radharani. So Radharani is the direct expansion of Krishna. So you should not think of Radharani as an ordinary person. So this is sum and substance of what is the significance of Radharani and her why she is very important to the Gaudiyas. The Gaudiyas are basically worshippers of Radharani. That's the prime object of worship for Vaishnavas in this sampradaya. And Radhashtami is not so much known. So many things about Radharani is confidential. The pastimes of Radharani are confidential. They are not meant to be discussed widely, especially those intimate pastimes of Radharani. So Radharani's appearance is coming up this Tuesday. Those who just joined, so we will be celebrating this at the temple, the Vedic Cultural Center of Samamish, and some of you did visit VCC for Krishna Janmashtami celebration. So the format of the celebration would be still the same. The VCC is following all the CDC guidelines. So there would be 6 feet distance. You will have to register, and I'll send the link for registration, and you will be allotted a 15-minute slot. You'll have to wear masks when you come. You can have darshan, and there would be take home prasadam that would be served out of food truck. So all the guidelines are being followed. It would be on a smaller scale, but if you get an opportunity, please come and have darshan. So having said that, I'll resume with the class where we concluded last time. Does anyone have any questions or comments at this point in time before we continue?
One question about you said Krishna accumulated the potential into a form. Can you explain a little more?
Yeah, so Krishna has different internal potencies. So one of the potencies that Krishna is pleasure potency, the potency that gives pleasure to him. So that potency, he gives that potency a form, and that is that form is an expansion of himself, and that personality is Radharani. Just like Krishna has another potency of delivering the conditioned souls, right? So that is his another function is to give or impart spiritual knowledge, right? So that potency invests in Balram, who is also another expansion of Krishna. He is also a direct expansion of Krishna, right? So that is Guru Tattva. So these are the different energies of Krishna which are which assume a form when Krishna directly expands. So I think there was a question last week, and then I responded, and I was explaining the personality of Godhead comprises of 5 principles or 5 personalities. People sometimes they ask in different traditions or religions of the world. Well, many religions or traditions don't even have idea about who is God, right? They say God is great, but how is God great, right? So when you say like Allahu Akbar, so God is great, but how is he great? Like there is not much detailed description. It's not that Islam denies the form of God, but there is not much description. In Christianity, they accept that God has a human-like form when it says that God created man in his image, but then there is no further description. But in the Vedic literature, we find detailed description of how God looks like. And so the question is God a male or a female, right? Sometimes in the Abrahamic traditions, they depict God as a white old man with a long beard, so that's also very controversial. So we say that, well, God is neither male nor female. There is more to that. So one is Krishna, right? So he's the original Purusha. Then Radharani, she is feminine. So Krishna is never worshipped alone. We've seen on the altar, he's never worshipped. It's always Krishna and Radha. So that there is a masculine aspect, there is a feminine aspect. And there is always, there are more principles, especially when you see Jagannath, Baldev, Subhadra, and Sudarshan. The 4 principles are described over there. Same with Sitaram, Lakshmana, Hanuman. But there are actually 5 principles, and I'll talk about those 5 principles. Just a second. Yeah, so the 5 principles is, so one is the feminine aspect that I mentioned. Then the other is Guru Tattva, which is a direct expansion of Krishna, right? So that is manifested as Balram in Krishna Leela. In Ram Leela, that is manifested as Lakshman. Similarly, in Ram Leela, we have Sita Devi, that is the feminine aspect, right? In Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastime, there's also personalities. They all appear in male form, but there's Gadadhar Pandit who represents Radharani. Many of you might not be familiar with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastime, but we'll discuss that some other time. Then we have the pure devotees. The pure devotees are also part of the Godhead. Just like, if I say king, right? Now, when I say king, is king a one person? He's a one person, but the idea of king is not complete unless the king is accompanied by the entire entourage. That means, if you think about king, you think about the palace that the king lives in, right? There are elephants and there are horses and there are chariots and there are so many servants, and the king has a queen. So that completes the picture. If you remove all that, right, then the picture of the king is not complete. The same thing with Godhead. When you say God and you just say Krishna, then that's an incomplete picture. What's the complete picture? We just talked about. This is a complete picture. This is 2 verses. All this together comprises the entire aspect of Godhead. All the paraphernalia, everything is included. So there is a masculine aspect, there is a feminine aspect, and there is the aspect of imparting spiritual knowledge, which is the teacher, Balram or Lakshman. There is present Guru Tattva. Then the pure devotees, like Ramayana is not complete without Hanuman. So that's why you have Sita, Ram, Lakshmana, Hanuman. So 4 principles are there. Same thing, Jagannath, Baldev, Subhadra, and Sudarshan Chakra. Sudarshan Chakra is pure devotee of Krishna, Jagannath, right? So he's represented there. There are 4 aspects. Now the 5th is not always, you don't see. At least you don't see in the Jagannath, Baldev, Subhadra, Sudarshan deities. You don't see in Sitaram, Lakshmana, Hanuman. But in the Panch Tattva, in the Gaudiya Sampradaya, the 5th principle is Mahavishnu, which represents different incarnations. All the different incarnations which appear on the earth, they are expansions of Mahavishnu. Mahavishnu himself is an expansion of Balaram, who is an expansion of Krishna. So various incarnations of Krishna are represented by Mahavishnu. So in Ramayana, that takes the form of it's not just Ram alone is the embodiment or manifestation of Vishnu Tattva. Lakshman is there because he is Balram, but not only that, Bharat and Shatrugna, they are also Vishnu Tattva. So the Bharat and Shatrugna would represent the 5th category, which you don't generally see on the altar. You only see Sita, Ram, Lakshman, Hanuman. But these 5 aspects together comprise the entire picture of Godhead. So I hope that answers the question. So the coming back to your question about Radha Rani, she represents the pleasure potency of the Lord.
Understood. Thank you, Prabhu.
Anyone else has any questions? Okay, so we'll continue from verse number 39. I think we started discussing this verse, and then we just had read the first line of the purport, and we started discussing varnasrama. So I'll just read the translation again so that we can recollect what's happening. So Arjuna gave 2 reasons why he doesn't want to fight. The first reason was, well, if everyone that who is near and dear to me, if all they die, with whom I will share my success, with whom will I enjoy, right? That is his first reason. Second reason is, if I will accrue the sin of killing my teacher, my grandfather. So that's the second reason. Third reason he's talking about, well, if all the, there were like almost 4 million soldiers between the 2 armies who had assembled to fight. So 11 akshonis, which is usually a unit which runs into hundreds and thousands of not only infantry, but it includes horses and elephants. And there's a definition of what akshoni is, but it's a unit of a military flanks. So the Pandavas were 7 akshonis, and then I think the Kauravas were 11 akshonis. Together, it's like 18 akshonis, which comes to about 4 million soldiers. So all men, and when they would die, all the women, the wives, would remain unprotected, and then the unscrupulous men would exploit women. There would be unwanted progeny So then he's talking about when there is unwanted progeny, then the the family culture is destroyed, the varna culture is destroyed. They would stop offering pinda to the forefathers. So we have this Raj ceremony that is performed. Now, there are so many other ceremonies, but forefathers, when you come in that dynasty, there is an obligation to the forefathers in the Vedic culture. So they are offering this pinda, and that offering will stop, and all the pitris will fall down from their elevated positions. Now that's one reason, but the main reason is the Varna culture would be destroyed, because this is because of the progeny which is just born out of lust. It's not according to Garbhadan samskar, which is proper samskaras. When in the Varna culture, you want to beget good progeny, uh, and bring that progeny in proper Varna culture for spiritual upliftment. But when the women are exploited, which often happens after the war, where there's no one there to protect, then it's all unwanted population. So these are all the different reasons that he gives. So I'd given some introduction of what varnashram is last time. You might recall the whole idea of varnashram is that the varnas, they are divided based on the nature, and nature is, it's not so much about skills. I had mentioned it's more about what one is driven to do by. And then I think I had also talked about, if we see in this world, there is this conservative idea. So there is an orthodox position and there is a liberal position. And varnashram transcends both of them. How? Because the liberal idea is that, well, no rules and regulations should be followed. So in context of varnashram, no classes should be followed. The liberals, we should not have any sort of classes, right? Everyone's equal in all respects. And then the orthodox position is, well, no, classes should always be there, and you have to rigidly follow that structure. But they don't know why it needs to be followed, right? What's the purpose that you're trying to serve? It's just orthodoxy. And so liberalism is actually a position which developed out of in opposition to orthodoxy, because the orthodox position, if they cannot explain why we are doing the way we are doing, why do we have the classes, then the rational mind would question that. Does not want to be suffocated and doesn't want to be inhibited by those classes. So niyam agraha means not accept. They do not want to accept the rules of the classes. And agraha means insisting. Just like somebody comes at home and we are feeding them. In our Vedic culture, we generously feed our guests. Agraha. Have more, have a little bit more gulab jamun, have more puri, more shrikhand, right? So in this way, that is called agraha. So those who insist on following the rules, that position is called niyam agraha, insist. Now in Sanskrit, if you know a little bit about sandhis, like when you join words, so a plus a equals a, and a plus a also equals a. So when you combine niyam plus agraha, it becomes niyamagraha. And then when you combine niyam plus agraha, it still becomes niyamagraha. So basically both positions can be referred by one word when you combine it, niyamagraha. So varnashram is rejecting both. The orthodox position is also being rejected and liberal position is also rejected. The idea being that why is the liberal position rejected? The liberal position rejected is because it's impossible to eliminate classes. The classes will always exist. And the orthodox position is rejected because they're just following rules without really understanding, or they're insisting on following rules. Because they don't know the real reason for following the rules, they are not even following correctly. Just like, in India, the caste system is still very rigid. But the Varna system is destroyed. So what remains is a caste system where many times people insist on, doing marriage only within the same caste, which actually is a reflection of varnashram. In the Varna system, why is the marriage happening in the same Varnas? Because you want to preserve the purity of the Varna, the family culture. If you have two different Varnas, then the child, is subjected to two different kind of cultures. And then, just like in the division of labor in the modern economy, you have master of, why do we have a division of labor where you specialize in one particular skill? You don't want to be jack of all trades, master of none. But the same concept applies in varnashram, but it's not based on skills, it's based on nature. Uh, so the orthodoxy in the caste system remains, but that is not pure varnashram. The first of all, varnas are based just not they are not simply based on birth, it's also based on nature. And then there is the samskaras. One has to, it's not just, okay, I was born in a family of brahmana, that means that's it. You have to have that brahminical training, you have to study those shastras, learn, live simply. Brahmana cannot accept a job, a salaried job, cannot perform the function of you cannot do trading, you cannot do business. And so there is all this training and culture, all of that should be there. But now it's just caste, right? But if you look at people, they are all on the same level. They all go to the same universal education. We participate in modern economy. So the varna system is completely destroyed. So why are we discussing all this? Well, to progress in devotional service, varnashram is not the immediate and the most important thing. At least, one can make progress by what we'll learn throughout Bhagavad Gita, chanting the names of Krishna, doing deity worship, offering bhoga, reading Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam. But eventually at some stage, when you reach, if you want to make further progress, then at that level, it's important that we know what our varna is or what our nature is and act according to it. Just like karma yoga. What is karma yoga? We offer the fruits of our activities to Krishna, right? Just like if I'm offering bhoga to Krishna, I want to offer something that is unused, it's clean, it's pure. Jhutha offer nahi karte, right? Whatever we have ate, we don't offer that to Krishna, or whatever is consumed, we don't offer. Similarly, when we offer the results of our work to Krishna, it is more pleasing to Krishna if that work is pure. If the results of the work are from a pure work. And what is a pure work? Something that is natural to us. It's not artificial. When we are acting according to our nature, then that is free, that work is free from all kind of sinful reactions. Just like I've given this example, just like a carnivore, a tiger consumes flesh, that the tiger is not subject to sin, right? Because that's the nature of the tiger. Similarly, the same concept applies to the humans. I was saying there are so many grades of human beings. So you have aborigines, which they're just subsistent life. They are hunting or gathering things and going on. But then little advancement comes when it's a civilization that is advanced in arts. More advanced are those who have not just arts but have some science. But they are still considered on an animal level. Human life begins when you have 4 principles of morality, which we discussed last time. And then on that human level, those which are considered human because they are moral, further advanced are those who follow the divisions of the varnas. So in 2 places in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, it's better to do one's own duty, even if one does imperfectly, than to do somebody else's duty perfectly. Better to do one's own duty based on one's nature, even if it's done imperfectly, than to do somebody else's duty perfectly. Then we'll discuss that in much detail at a later point in time. So the orthodox position is rejected, and the liberal position is rejected because it's impossible to create a society where there are no classes. The classes will always persist. And I compiled some, like in academia, right? The idea that everyone should have universal education. But before that, let me say that, so the thing is, as soon as we try to remove class barriers, it creates new classes where the elites are those who are given the responsibility and have the power and position to remove inequality. You see? Okay, we want to remove inequality, but who will do that, right? So there are individuals who are invested with that power and authority to remove inequality. Now those people who have that authority become the new elites. So the division always persists. Like in academia, those who have the authority to allocation of funding, grants, and we have this affirmative action where all the races should be equally reflected. Like in India, they have this reservation for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. And now the people, those who have authority and power to make these things happen, decide, those becomes the new valid. Same thing in governance. Like best example is communism. The whole idea was, well, in a communist society, everyone will get based on their needs. And then if you look at Soviet Union, what happened was they created an entire hierarchy of bureaucrats, and who decided how the resources would be allocated, who gets to work in what role, right? So they became the new elites. Like in democracy, we have an elite class of who are career diplomats. There are political dynasties. You have the Clintons will go on, and the Bushes will go on. The father sons, the dynasties are there. And if you look at the voters, they are still struggling, right? The only reason democracy goes on because the communist idea is that there should continuously be a revolt, and if there is a revolt, then only we can keep things in line. But in democracy, the voters, they have the idea that, well, I can without without actually a violent takeover, they can just vote and change the government. So democracy by design allows that continuous change in leadership. But that's illusory. Like in every election, people think that, oh, the new government's going to be better, but there's the underclass still remains underclass. Same thing with commerce. The idea is that everyone should have equal opportunity to conduct business, and there should not be any monopoly. But the whole idea of capitalism is that, well, if you have the will and ability, you can have unlimited success. But you cannot be so successful that no one else can run a business. So there are restrictions on it. Some kind of way covers socialism. And then the elite class of bureaucrats, legislators, they actually ensure who gets the equal opportunity. Same thing with labor. So the labor was exploited for a long time. During monarchy, you can say the serfs were exploited. So now we have elite class of politicians who represent the Labour Party. There are powerful leaders of labor unions. There are highly paid attorneys who specialize in labor laws, and these are the people who have the ability. You can call them the elites within the labor. If you're talking about the labor segment, but they're still an underclass. They are not exactly slaves, but they are paid in depreciating fiat currency, and then in America especially, people, they work two jobs sometimes when they still struggle. So the point is that the classes always exist. And then the social, in this world, it's impossible to have a society where there are no classes. And as long as there are classes would be there is some chance, there is some probability of exploitation or discrimination. But the society can be as good as the character of the individual members, right? It's not the mechanism, it's not the philosophy behind it, it's the individual character of the persons. So let's make the best out of bad bargain. So Krishna is saying, see, that in the Varna culture or varnashram culture, the Vedic culture, they know that, well, this body and all the designations that come along with the body, like classes, they will keep on changing. Next, in this life, I have this particular gender and this particular class or varna. Next life, it could be something else. So these things will keep on changing. And even if I am elite right now, next life I might be an underclass or vice versa. That's not the solution of the problem. So instead of trying to artificially remove the classes, the idea is I should stop the cycle of birth and death, where I am continuously put into this designations and I always engaged in these class strifes. So how do you do that? Well, one way, there are many ways, but one way is if you're acting according to our nature, we don't accrue sin. And sin is one of the reasons then that the cycle continues. So that's the reason why Krishna is saying better to do work according to one's nature, even if it's done imperfectly, than to do somebody else's job perfectly. So this is exactly opposite to the conventional idea or the contemporary idea right now, which is, well, if you can get a job done, you should be awarded the job, right? It's completely different to that idea, because the current worldview is that, well, you live and die only once, and you want to make the best out of this life. And so everyone should get that, should pursue whatever goal or desire that they have, and the nature of the person is not taken into account. There's no effort to cultivate those natures and things like that. So again, we'll discuss this at an appropriate time, but this is a brief background about what that varnashram system is. So here Arjuna is saying is that the entire institution of the varnashram would be destroyed, right? As the example I say it is that, how is the varna culture preserved? In the varnashram system, they're very cautious with whom they marry, right? But it's not based on caste. You want to ensure that the husband and wife, if they are from the same varna, then they have a strong culture of that varna which can be passed on to the child. Just like in the Kshatriya varna, right from the childhood, the child is trained in that valor. First of all, the child is born in that family because of that prior nature, and then that culture is cultivated. And the mothers are also like that. They don't mind. They have that heart of sacrificing their son in war if that the need may be. Even the girls are trained. They don't go out and fight in the war, but if there is a need in emergency, they are also skilled. They can fight. Like we see the example of Rani Lakshmi Bai, right? When there was a need, she was able to step up. So that strong varna culture is, how is it possible? Because they are ensuring that the right from garbhadan samskar, which is inviting a soul to take a place in the womb of the mother. Select an auspicious time for conception. There are so many things. After the child is in the womb, there are samskaras that are provided to provide that good mental impression. When the child is born, is exposed to that kind of environment. Like in the Kshatriya example that I was giving is, they see how their uncles and the fathers and brothers, and they are brought up in that environment. Same thing with brahmanas. They accept the vow of poverty. Why? Because if they accept the vow of poverty voluntarily, then they can speak the truth. So they are trained from the childhood. It cannot be artificial. So Arjuna is saying, when all the soldiers will die, then what will happen is that these women won't be protected, and then unscrupulous men would exploit the women, and there would be unwanted progeny, right? And this progeny won't be brought up in family culture, right? or the tradition. So this would be complete societal collapse, and that's the worst thing that can happen to a Vedic culture. So that's his argument. He says the elders of the members are responsible for purifying processes in the family, beginning from birth to death. But on death of the elder members, such family traditions of purification will stop. The samskaras will stop. The remaining younger family members may develop irreligious habits, thereby lose their chance of spiritual salvation. Therefore, for no purpose should the elder members be slain. So, this is the reason that he is providing. Any questions on this one?
Did it happen?
Can you say that again? I lost you. I think your voice was getting interrupted.
So actually, the original question, like the varnasrama labs, did it happen after the war?
I'm still losing you. Maybe
I don't know.
you want to send a message on WhatsApp. If the chat option is not working, I'll read. You can send it to the group also. Because your voice is breaking. Is anyone else can understand what he's saying?
No.
Is that really happened after the war? Okay, that's the question. Okay. Is that really happened after the war? Well, the chances are always there. I don't think, as far as I know, if Mahabharata explicitly mentions if that happened or not. I know Yudhishthir became the king, and Yudhishthir being a pious king, and he's a Dharmaraj himself. It doesn't seem like it happened. There is no mention to it, and he was able to keep things in control. It seems, because after that his the son Parikshit, he also becomes, and in Bhagavad, he becomes the king after the Pandavas retire. And Srimad Bhagavatam describes in detail how Parikshit, in his rule, there was no irreligious activities happening. So, but the chances are always there. Even in modern day, we see, when these wars are happening, you see when these armies, they again, it depends on the culture. If sometimes the people are not culturally. Even during the war, there is genocide. The indiscriminate killing of civilians, which did not happen during Mahabharata. They were fighting in a civilized way. In the night, they would not even attack. They would go to each other camps. They might have dinner together. They would talk together. Only fight during daytime and away from civilization. The women, children, the old men, they are not affected by it. But nowadays, you don't see those kind of discrimination necessarily. Like the wars in the Balkans that happened, Serbia, Bosnia, there was a lot of genocide that happens. There's looting, there's rape, and the war is very ugly, and the chances of that happening, is always there. So it's not necessarily just a modern phenomena. The soldiers might themselves not do that. I think what Bhagavad Gita is trying to say is that even if the Kshatriyas don't do it, but if so many Kshatriyas are killed, then the Vandals, the outcasts, they might come and attack it. Like, the reason why Krishna ran away, apparently, of course, he doesn't have to run away from anyone, but he ran away from Mathura after defeating Jarasandha 17 times, 18th time. Why did he run away? Because at one end, Jarasandha was attacking, and at the same time, there was another Yavana. Yavana means he's outside of the Varna culture. He's not part of varnasrama. Jarasandha, at least, is a Kshatriya. So Kala Yavan, he attacked. So these are barbarians, these are Vandals. They don't have any culture. They are not going to, follow the rules and etiquettes of what a proper civilized way of fighting or protecting the civilians is. So even during the time of Krishna, the Vandals and the outcasts, they're always there. The outcasts, it's the Varna culture, though it was very widely prevalent, but it's not that all humans were part of Varna culture. That's why the classification is there. The Aryans are the followers of Varna culture, but there are others who are not. And so I don't think that necessarily happened after the war. There's no direct description to answer your question in short. But the chance is always there. And so Arjuna is, mentioning that likelihood. Because what happened? 4 million soldiers died, right? Which, pretty much everyone was annihilated except for the 5 brothers, the Pandavas. Okay. Does it answer your question?
Yeah.
Verse number 40. Adharma vibhavat Krishna pradushyanti kulastriya strishu dustasu varsneya jayate varnashankaraha. When irreligion is prominent in the family, O Krishna, the women of the family become polluted, and from the degradation of womanhood, O descendant of Vrishni, comes unwanted progeny. So we discuss this a little bit. We'll see if there's more, and then we will. So Varna Shankara, here specifically Krishna is referring to the word Varna Shankara. So what is Shankara? So in a lot of Indian languages, you might have come across this word Sakad or Sankalan, the Sanskrit Sankalan. If some of you, if you studied in India and if you did not study in an English medium of instruction, then like we have in mathematics, we have integration, right? You have like the integration and differentiation, right? The calculus. So integration. So the word they use in Hindi or any other, maybe other vernacular languages, they call it Sankalan. Sankalan means linking. This Sankara is coming from the same root. It means linking. This means linking of the Varnas. That means the Varnas are not pure. They are mixed. They are mixed with each other. That is Varna Sankara. So what it means is that when the women are left unprotected, unscrupulous men, when they exploit these women, they are, they're not following the, obviously there's no distinction of or the restriction of the varna, and so the unwanted progeny which is born, they would be of mixed nature, right? They're not brought up in a particular nature, so they might have influence of different kind of natures, partially this, partially that, or none of that. So that is what varna shankara is being referred. So here Arjuna is expanding on that theme, and then he is explicitly saying that. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions that good population in human society is the basic principle for peace and prosperity and spiritual progress in life. Right? Suppose there are places in the world right now, there is constant civil war going on. A lot of places in Africa, there are multiple militias, and then there are rebels, and then there is even the government is corrupt, and you cannot have a peaceful life. That what's the question of making spiritual progress, right? And why is that, right? Because there is no standard of any sort. These are far, far away from any kind of moral life, even moral life, what to speak about, life of Aryans. So the varnashram religion principles were so designed that good population would prevail in the society for general spiritual progress of state and community. Such population depends on the chastity and faithfulness of womanhood, right? As children are very prone to be misled, women are also similarly prone to degradation. So it's possible, especially when the women are not protected by men, the unscrupulous men would exploit them, and therefore both, even old men need protection, cow need protection, brahmanas need protection. Like brahmanas are not like warrior kind of mentality, right? So the brahmanas, especially because they are guiding the society, they all of them need to be protected. Women need to be protected, children need to be protected, and women also traditionally, they are not in depth studied in scriptures and in different sound. They don't go through a formal training, right? So here, and just like children, they also don't go through a lot of detailed training, and so they could be misled. That's what Arjuna is, Srila Prabhupada is explaining over here. So in this way, they all need protection, and to make sure that unscrupulous men don't take advantage of these unprotected women. So the different family traditions of religious activities should always, here there is a mention that there is a quote from Chanakya Pandit, and so many different scriptures, there are limitations of men and women, they are described in detail. So both men and women, they have their own weaknesses, and I have explained that in elaborated a little bit in one of my blog posts. I think it's important to go over that. Let me see. Yeah. So both men and women, they have their own weaknesses, and if we are not protected against those weaknesses, then their degradation happens. And that's why we have regulative principles which protect us from those kind of degradation. So let's talk about what are the weaknesses of men. So there are 4 primary weaknesses or illicit propensities which which are very predominant in men. So men, and then each of them are on a different level. So there is one on a sensual level, there is a weakness on a mental level, intellectual level, and an identity or an ego level. So men, they are at a sensual level, they are prone to indulgence, different sensual pleasures and luxuries if they are not properly trained, especially in Varna culture. So different kind of indulgence is there. Sometimes like in Niti Shastra, it is said that if the man is not responsible, sometimes they get married, but they are still living as a life of a bachelor, in the sense that they would spend so much time with their friends. In that way, the wife is neglected, the children are neglected. So that propensity might be there unless proper culture or training is there. So the propensity to indulge is there on a sensual level. And the grossest way in which they can indulge is, they get attached or addicted to gambling, right? And with gambling comes the vice of, when the situation is aggravated, they might commit to thievery, in that sense that you need money to gamble. And if they're constantly losing things, they might start taking away ornaments of their wives, and sell that, get money, still gamble, or they might commit to thievery. And we see that in historically, maybe even true today, where men who are very much indulgent on a sensual level, they commit to all kind of activities. So that is sensual level. The other weakness that men have is, there is a tendency of apathy. That means they could become cold-hearted or cruel-hearted. And when that happens, they might be cruel to their own family members sometimes, their children, their wives. And in an extreme case, especially if they are already indulging in gambling and they're so much addicted to it, they might engage in murder. Again, these are extreme examples, and they might not even hesitate to murder a brahmana, a woman, a king, a father, just to fulfill their desire of being indulgent. Gambling is one. But so in order to, the worst case is, again, when one way one become apathy, one develops apathy is by indulging in eating meat, right? So that's why we have these 4 regulative principles. After that, what happens is, on an intellectual level, right, if they, many of these, they are serially linked, one leads to another, another leads to another, is that on an intellectual level, it can further degrade to into a tendency to become despondent, where the intelligence cannot think properly, right? So if they are constantly losing money in gambling, and they're committing to thievery and heinous crimes, and murder is an extreme example, but this entire these examples are given to give us an idea of the full scale of degradation that's possible. And see, in order to overcome depression, or just forget about things, they might take to intoxication. So they are called drunkards. So the Sanskrit word here is surapo, means to drink, sura. And then this can further degrade into the propensity to degrade at a ego or identity level is to dishonest. And the worst way of being dishonest is you betray your close relatives, right? Even one guru, or not just guru, they might seduce guru's wife. These examples are given. That means they are engaged in illicit sex. And why we discussed why these 4 principles last time, is that when one gets engaged in enjoying body, right, and a sensual level, they are reinforcing the bodily conception of life. And that is the greatest form of dishonesty, because body is not the truth, the soul is the truth, right? So at an identity level, this is the greatest form of degradation. So now somebody might question, why is it only men that they are mentioned over here? So these are the basic tendency within which men have. They are dormant, and if they're not brought up in proper culture, or even if they have some training, but if by bad association, this dormant propensities can become active. Now, women can also acquire those qualities, but their quality is by association. Again, if their husband is like that, and again, women, if wife is not strong enough, she could encourage or participate in this kind of activities. But the initiator is the man. So that's why the man is mentioned. Similarly, the women, they also have their own weaknesses. And again, they are kind of mentioned at 4 levels. So ideally, when we see women, they are brought up in a nice culture and nice training, they are very chaste. And they are chaste to the husband, they are chaste to the family traditions, the in-laws. But women generally, they are soft-hearted. And it is said that one should never insult a woman. Never insult a woman. Why? because they are soft hearted, and in that sense they don't have a high level of tolerance. So not only actual insult, but even the perception of insult can trigger them to become independent. So when they are chaste, they're they're serving, and they are facilitating the husband in his duties. But if there is even a perception of insult, not actual insult, even there is a perception of insult which a man can tolerate, man can even tolerate an insult. They are they are prone, generally, relatively, women, they are very soft hearted. So then there is a tendency to become independent. So what are the examples? There are many examples even in scriptures, not just of ordinary people, even up to Parvati, who is a demigoddess, right? Or even the wife of Dashrath Maharaj, who was such a great queen. What's Bharat's mother, Kaikeyi?
Kaikeyi.
Yeah. So Kaikeyi, if you see, she was very chaste. She was, she was a favorite wife, if I remember it correctly. Dashrath Maharaj liked her very much, and she had actually saved. She was so chaste, she had saved Dashrath from a particular war, in which she was his charioteer, and she was safely able to drive the chariot away when Dashrath Maharaj was at risk of his life. And Dashrath Maharaj, he was so happy, he asked for two boons, and she never used that boons until much later point in time, and she was fully dedicated to Dashrath. When Ram was being coronated, she was more happy. She was more happy than Rama's mother, others, uh, uh, Kaushalya, right? So she was actually very happy. And at the time when Mantra came and she started questioning Kaikeyi, why are you so happy? He says, didn't you hear that Ram is getting coronated? That's why I'm asking you. You should be in sorrow. He says, Ram, and then she starts bad mouthing and says so many bad things. And Kaikeyi just ignores. He does not listen to her. You are crazy. What are you talking about? Ram is very dear to me. She's countering all the arguments that Kaikeyi, the mantra, is presenting. But when she says one thing, there was one particular statement that she says, after which, she actually becomes intolerant. The propensity of intolerance comes out. What was that? She makes the statement that if Ram becomes the king, he will treat Bharat as a servant, not, but that more than that, when she said the later part, that he would make you the maid servant, right? She will make you the maid servant of Kaushalya. Then actually she was alarmed that I would be insulted, I would be treated as a maid servant. Just the possibility, just the possibility that she would be insulted in this way, the propensity to become intolerant came about. And what did she do after that? Then the degradation happens at an independent level. That means he became independent, in the sense that earlier she was so dedicated to Dashrath, right? Now she said, I'm going to use those two boons, and she used it in such a cruel way that Dashrath was crying, and he's saying that I won't be able to live. It's very cruel for you to do like that. And she does not listen, and she actually uses those two boons to make Bharat the king and send Rama to the forest. And so now she is acting independently of the interest of her husband. Her husband is saying that Ram is more dear to me than anyone else, and this would be injustice to him. He's already coronated as the prince, or to be the king. But now she is acting independently. So just that thought of intolerance, thought of being insulted, leads even a chaste woman to act independently. So that's why the scripture saying one should be extremely cautious men should be extremely cautious to take care of their wives in a very nice way, and they should not even have the perception of being insulted. There is another example of Sati, Shiva's first wife, and Shiva's father-in-law, what's his name, Daksha, he did not like Shiva. He says, this Shiva is always unclean. He covers his body with ashes from the crematory, and he's wearing skulls, and so he did not have a good opinion about Lord Shiva. So whenever he used to perform any religious ceremonies or sacrifices, fire sacrifices, he would never invite Lord Shiva. So one day he was doing a big sacrifice, and he invited. So Daksha had, I think, 60 daughters, and these daughters were responsible for progenies, different species, responsible for giving birth to all the species in the universe. That's a different pastime. We'll discuss some other time. But he invites all his daughters and their husbands, but does not invite Shiva and doesn't invite Sati. So when Sati comes to know that this sacrifice is going on, she's very, like women in general, they like a lot of social life. And see, I want to see all my sisters and my mother and my father. And Lord Shiva says, don't go. You will regret. We are not invited. Don't go. So she still, she does not listen. She goes. And, her father does not even look at her because of her association with Shiva. He is neglecting him. And when the oblations, time to offer oblations, the fire sacrifice come, oblations are offered to all the demigods, Brahma and all, but there is no oblation offered to Lord Shiva. And she takes this as an insult. And she becomes so angry, and she starts this argument with his father, and you think that Shiva is a degraded person. Actually, he is the most auspicious of all. He's completely transcendental. He's not affected by this. And finally says, because you insulted my husband, you have taken away, you have insulted me, and there's no point for me to live. She basically self-immolates her. By her mystic power, she assumes fire, and then the fire consumes her body. And then the whole reaction starts. Lord Shiva comes to know what happened. Then he sends his army of, very ghostly and horrible looking creatures, and they make a mess out of the fire sacrifice. And finally, he comes, and Daksha's head is chopped off, and so there's a lot of other things happen. But again, the point is that Sati was not able to tolerate the insult to her because her husband was insulted. So that's why the first instruction. There is a question. However, there is no mention of woman not being intelligent or trustworthy. That is a contradiction. Can you explain that? We earlier talked about all living being as a part of Supreme Godhead. However, there is no mention of woman not being intelligent. So when you say no mention, are you saying no mention where? I know it's mentioned in the purport, and that's what I'm trying to explain over here. Let me finish the explanation, and maybe we'll come. Hopefully that will answer the question. Okay. So what happens when women become independent, right? When women start acting independently, then, I mean, this is not just women. So I've said over here, women and men attached to such women, right? So primarily, these qualities are dormantly present within women, and then men who are, very much attached to womanly association, and they are so then they also acquire these qualities by that association. So those examples are given. So primarily women, because they are dormant, and then men can also acquire. Just like in the previous example, women can also acquire these qualities by association with men. So similarly, men can acquire these qualities. These also apply to men who are, have given up their varna or duties, and by bad association or association of women who have these dormant qualities manifested, then they can also acquire that. Okay, so what happens when they become when they become independent? So again, this in any case, any person, right, whether man or woman, when one starts acting independent, what happens is the independence which was not there, that now one wants to satisfy one's own self-interest. And so the dormant propensity of cunningness comes out. Like what was the cunningness in case of Kaikeyi? She used her independence. She didn't want to act according in the interest of her husband, and she used those boons when, cunningly to act against the interest of her husband. Why did Dashrath initially say that? Oh, 2 boons? Why 2 boons? You can ask as many, you want to use your 2 boons which I had promised? You can use as many boons. I'll give you more. Why was he confident? He was confident because he said, my wife will never act against my self-interest. She's one with me. But because she was independent now, what happened? The dormant propensity of cunningness came out, right? In that regard, it says, don't trust such a woman. You see? So you have to see in contextually what it says. In that context, when, women, a particular woman is acting independently because she is aggravated by an insult, in that situation, don't trust. It doesn't mean that in all conditions, all women should never be trusted, right? If that was the case, Dashrath would have never given those 2 boons to her wife Kaikeyi, right? If he did not trust. What was the basis of Dashrath to give those 2 boons to Kaikeyi? Because he trusted that she will use those boons and I will fulfill those boons, but she would not use those boons against dharma, counteracting the principles of religion, to deny something like, he could have never ever dreamt that, Ram would be, not only his right to become king would be taken away and he would be sent to forest. Why? Right? He always trusted his wife. So it's not that, it's not a blanket statement that women in general should never be trusted. It's referring to this specific instance where a woman, who is insulted, and because of that insult, that woman is acting independently, she should not be trusted. Why? It's not for one's own self-interest. It's the interest of the woman herself that she should not be trusted. Why? Because if we trust a woman or a man who is associating with such a woman, then the situation will aggravate further. What's the further aggravation that would happen? Is that the mind would now fill with lot of desires. So now with cunningness, if one fulfills one desire, he says, oh, now I can do more things. And now I have so many different desires. Right? Now on the mental level, you see, for the man, the degradation happens the other way. It starts on a sensual, mental, intellectual, then ego. But here you see it happens for women in the opposite direction. Ego is first hurt with insult. Then the intelligence gets corrupted. Now the mind is filled with all kind of desires, covetousness. In order to fulfill all these desires, then the tendency of mercilessness, akaruna, comes out. Right? So, in order to fulfill one's own desires, if this is not checked, what will happen is the mercilessness will come out. Now, in such a situation, one should not appoint, such a woman or a man who is attached and associating with such woman. Both of them should not be given any official position. That's what it's saying. Why? Because now what happens, in such a situation, a person has trust, that person has power, then they will use that power and to fulfill all the kind of desires that the mind has now been fulfilled, right? Because now they have full power, full authority to be able to do that. And when that happens, the highest form of degradation that can happen is that on a sensual level. The further degradation happens on a sensual level. And on that sensual level, the greatest attraction is the attraction for sexual engagement. And it's possible that, in order to fulfill that desire, a woman or a man who is associating with such a woman, they would acquire these qualities, and they would unlimitedly excess in sensual indulgence on a bodily level. So there are actually many examples. I think, if you look at history and if you study history, there is an example of Queen Victoria. There are stories of her being in authority, and I'm not sure if there is necessarily multi-amorous, but she definitely had. I was reading something recently. I'll find an article. Even in India, there was a. I don't give out any specific names, but there are other examples where, with particular kind of degradation, there are instances where where women have gone through this kind of particular degradation, and they have used that to have degraded on a sensual level, and have engaged in multi-amorous relationship. Now what happens in that level? It says when this happens, when somebody, now this is the highest level of degradation that's possible. So when this happens in that situation, don't envy, because now this woman or man who is associating with such women, they have this unlimited authority to act, and they have so many desires, and they have trust of at least a certain party of people who are trusting them. Then one should not envy, because when such a person is envied, what will happen? They will feel threatened. In order to protect their position, they could engage in extreme kind of activities, like even killing a political opponent. And so this is the fourth stage of instructions that is mentioned. These are 4 protections. So these instructions are said, it's not just, it's for protecting that individual who is going through that degradation. Just like in the case of men, these instructions are also there, right? This is protection. No gambling is to protect that individual. No meeting, no intoxication, no illicit sex, right? So similarly, these instructions which are given is to protect that particular individual at that particular stage of instance, right? So they're not all blanket statements. These are very contextual, and we should understand them in a contextual way. And in a purport, there's only so much you can say, and so there is a reference that is given, but you have to explain this in detail. Otherwise, it is it is difficult to understand. So as an example, so the answer to the question that was posted, yeah. So if it was a blanket statement, and Janak Maharaj, not Janak, Dashrath, he's considered as a righteous ruler. He's knower of dharma, and if he would really follow the instruction, he would have never trusted his wife, right? It's not a blanket statement. Rather, he put unlimited faith in his wife, right? He gave him that boon, right? So the specific instruction, to answer your question, don't trust, is very contextual. It's referred to that particular situation where women is acting independently of sastric injunction, independently of the family tradition, independently of respect and honor of the husband. In that situation, she should not be trusted. Hopefully, we never have to arrive at that situation, because what is the trigger for that situation to happen, right? Why that independence come? Because men don't respect women, or they insult them, or like in this case, well, it was not Dashrath Maharaj's fault. I mean, he didn't do anything. Sometimes things are beyond our control, but at least what is within our control, one should be always careful to respect women to the highest extent, and they should not even have a perception of being insulted. So this is the sum and substance of this entire explanation that I tried to provide over here. Does that answer your question, Parul?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So the different family traditions of religious activity should always engage them, and thus their chastity and devotion will give birth to a good population eligible for participating in varnashram system. On the failure of such varnashram dharma, naturally women become free, and when there is no protection, unscrupulous men would mix with them, and then thus adultery is indulged at the risk of unwanted population. Irresponsible men also provoke adultery in society, and thus unwanted children flood the human race at the risk of war and pestilence. So these are different reasons why Arjuna is saying that the outcome of this war doesn't look good, right? I think I had some comments. So yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, so he's saying unwanted population. So this is quality of the population is what being referred to. In terms of quantity, we generally right now there's another idea in the present context that the global population is a lot. You're about 7-8 billion people, and if you look at Vedic times in description in Mahabharata, Ramayana, the population of the earth was many hundred times more than what it is right now. So the problem is not the population, but the artificial standard of living. If you see, like say for example, the population of the United States is only 4% of the global population, but United States consumes 25% of the resources globally. Now, with the globalization and expansion of economy all over the world, India, China, and other populous countries, they also want to emulate and live the same standard of living. And so that is unsustainable. And so when we say that the population is taking a toll, it's not the population itself, it's the artificial standard of living. Like Mahatma Gandhi said that, well, there is enough in this world for everyone's need, but there is not enough for everyone's greed, right? So the artificial standard of living is taking a toll, and when everyone wants to do that, one should it's not sustainable. Okay, war and pestilence. So this is nature's arrangement. The nature's arrangement is that whenever there is unwanted population, in the sense that it's a burden on the earth. Unwanted population is referring to the quality of the people. People who are not dharmic, they are not moral. They are just creating so much nuisance and trouble. The nature makes the arrangement for the population to be annihilated. And in the Christian theology, there is this idea of force. What is the idea of 4 horsemen of what is it called? 4 horsemen of the doom, I believe. Yeah, apocalypse. 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Does anyone know that? 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Has anyone heard? So the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, if I remember correctly, they are one is death, one is war, one is pestilence, and then 4th is famine. Let me see. This idea you find it in other traditions also. Yes, here death, famine, war, and conquest. So these are they are pictorially depicted over here. So even in the Christian theology, they have this idea that when there is unwanted population, the nature's way to bring that in control is either there is war where there are so many people killed, or there is a disease, like a pandemic like one we are going on right now, and then there is famine, and there could be other reasons for death, right? So it's similar idea. So anyway, Prabhupada is quoting that over here, and then he's saying is that is brought into so he's a risky when irresponsible men they engage in adultery, and the varna system is broken, and there is so many unwanted population. Then what happens is again that the risk is that in order for that to be fixed, the nature's arrangement is to bring about war and pestilence. So it's a kind of a cumulative cycle. Okay, any questions? I think we are 5 more minutes. We might be able to do one more verse. Let me see. But before that, anyone has any questions? If there are questions, then we'll just answer those questions and then continue on from next verse next time. Anyone? Okay, so let's try to do one more verse. I don't think I have to speak a lot. Unlike the previous 2 verses, there was a lot of explanation that was needed. I think we should be able to cover this within another 5-7 minutes. So let's go through verse number 41. Sankaro narakayeva kulagnanan kulasya cha patanti pitro hi esham luptapindo daka kriya. Translation: an increase of unwanted population certainly causes hellish life, both for the family and for those who destroy the family tradition. The ancestors of such corrupt families fall down because the performances for offering them food and water are entirely stopped. So this is the Shraddha ceremony, or the offering of pindas to the forefathers. So that is one of the family traditions. There are other family traditions, all of them would be stopped, but when this particular family tradition stops, the pitris again won't be happy, and that is what Arjuna is referring to. So let's read the purport. According to the rules and regulations of fruitive activities, there is a need to offer periodical food and water to the forefathers of the family. This offering is performed by the worship of Vishnu, because eating the remnants of food offered to Vishnu can deliver one from all kinds of sinful reactions. Sometimes the forefathers may be suffering from various types of sinful reactions, and sometimes some of them cannot even acquire a gross material body and are forced to remain in subtle bodies as ghosts. Thus, when the remnants of the prasadam are offered to forefathers by descendants, the forefathers are released from ghostly or other kinds of miserable life. Such help rendered to the forefathers is a family tradition, and those who are not in devotional life are required to perform such rituals. One who is engaged in devotional life is not required to perform such actions. Simply by performing devotional service, one can deliver hundreds and thousands of forefathers from all kinds of miseries, as is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam. Anyone who has taken shelter of the lotus feet of Mukunda, the giver of liberation, giving up all the obligation, and has taken to the path in all seriousness, owes neither duties nor obligations to the demigods, sages, general living entities, family members, humankind, or forefathers. Such obligations are automatically fulfilled by the performance of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So here Srila Prabhupada first explains what is the need for offering these pindas. So in Bhagavad Gita, later we'll study where Krishna says, Yanti devam ratan devam pitra yanti pitravatan bhutani yanti bhuteja yanti mad yajno api mam. He says the worshippers of the demigods go to the destination where the demigods live. The worshippers of forefathers, they achieve the destination where the forefather lives. And those who are worshippers of ghostly beings take birth among those beings. And those who are worshippers of me, they come to me. So based on what our mood of worship is, we achieve similar destination. So the offering of pinda is, we find it in Vedic tradition, but also in other traditions. So there was an animation movie a couple of years ago. What is it called? Loco or Coco? I think there was an animation movie called Coco. I think so even in the Latin culture, I think, if somebody might have seen that movie, and that what it depicts is that in Latin culture also they have this idea that as long as one remember, they have this Day of the Dead. You can look it up. I think it's called the Day of the Dead that they celebrate. So on this particular day, they remember those who, their ancestors who were passed away, and the idea is that as long as you remember your ancestors every year, they will continue to live in that realm where they are enjoying, and they are able to live a nice comfortable life. But once their descendants and children, grandchildren, they stop remembering them, they are forced to fall down. So it's a similar idea. So the pitris, as long as the pindadan is offered to the pitris, they will continue to live in pitri loka. When the offering is stopped, what will happen is they would be deprived of that destination, and they will again have to come down to the earth and take a birth. So the offering is actually, it's a currency by which they are able to sustain their life. So Arjuna is saying that pitris won't be happy. First of all, the family tradition is stopped. This is not legitimately begotten progeny. They are not going to offer the pindadan to the forefathers. the forefathers will stop receiving it and they will fall down. So that's the argument that he's making. So anyway, this is, it's much more refined in the Vedic culture, but the idea is there in all cultures. So the Day of the Dead, in the Spanish they call it Dia de Muertos. So yeah, you can read more about that. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada quotes this verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, which is saying those who are pure devotees, who are fully surrendered to Krishna, and they don't own all these obligations. So in this human life, we have so many obligations. If you in the Vedic culture, see there are 33 million demigods and demigoddesses, and then they're all worshipable, and we have obligations to all. Like Nanda Maharaj, he had obligation to Indra. He was doing Indra Puja. As a Vaishya, is dependent on the rain to grow his crops. And Krishna said, okay, let's stop that. But the idea is, in general, we cannot fulfill all these obligations, especially in Kali Yuga. In other yugas, people are still able to do it. And so, as long as one is fully surrendered, not half surrendered, one is fully taken sheltered of the Lord, and Krishna being the source of all the demigods and all the other authorities, all other obligations are taken care of. One does not owe anything. Just like for a higher cause, I might have obligation to my parents, I might have obligation to my country, my society. If I've studied engineering or whatever I have studied, then I'm expected to serve the country back and provide my services. But if one, for a higher cause, say one joins military service on armed forces, he has given other obligations to his parents. He's not taking care of his parents. Maybe the soldier would die fighting the war. Obligation towards her wife, the children, or maybe teaching, or he could have become an engineer in a corporation or other. All those obligations, they are pardoned, right? Rather, that person is respected because he fought for the country, he joined the armed services. Now in regular circumstances, if I say, okay, I'm not going to take care of my wife, my kids, my parents, they are on their own, I don't want to serve the society, though the society brought me up, they taught me, and I am just going to give all that up. Is it appreciated? No. Right? But for a higher cause, if I give that up, right, everything else is pardoned. Even the government might take care. Oh, this is a serviceman. If he dies or becomes handicapped, okay, we'll maintain the family, or this would be taken care of. Their children might have special privileges. All these things are there. Similarly, we do have obligations to different forefathers, who gave us this body, who gave us the family culture. So I have an obligation to offer pindan to my forefathers. I have obligation to the sages who gave all this knowledge. I have obligation to the demigods. I have obligation to my family members, right? But for a higher cause, if I'm fully surrendered to Krishna, who is the original source and maintainer of all these living entities, those such obligations are automatically fulfilled. Why those are not required? It's not that, they're still fulfilled, but I'm not fulfilling it if I am fully surrendered. So to the extent that we are fully surrendered, all these obligations are taken care of. So here Prabhupada is trying to make a point. Arjuna is not making the point, but Prabhupada is giving a hint that ultimately in Bhagavad Gita, eventually Krishna will explain Arjuna that, okay, each of these arguments, all the three arguments would be addressed systematically. But here we are getting a prelude to it, where the logic of the counter argument is that, well, Arjuna, if you act according to what Krishna is saying, all these obligations would be taken care of. So here's that's the gist of the purport over here. So I think we are over time, and I think we can take a pause over here. If you have any questions or comments at this point in time, please raise them right now. If not, you can always text, call, reach out to me by other channels, and then we'll or else we can take the questions next time whenever they arise. So does anyone wants to say anything?
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, so if there are no further questions, we'll conclude today's class. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Radhastami is on Tuesday, and those who join later, I'll be sharing a link. You can register online for a specific slot of appointment, and then all CDC guidelines will be followed. And I provided a brief explanation of Radhastami in the beginning of the class. So if you missed it, you can watch the recording. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.